Hi there, so video number 3. This is a different take to my previous videos. This one's very much more for girls who are looking to go through some kind of medical transition. And this very first one of those, there's going to be a series of these, the next one will be about top surgery. This one's about hormones and the impact of hormones and how I feel about things, having been on hormones now for about 15 months or so. And I guess I wanted to make this video because way back when I started life as Maria, I saw numerous YouTube videos and read all sorts of things online about the impact of hormone treatment and what it can do to a person. That's physical things, everything from changing shoe size to making your hair curly. That might be true for me, who knows? All the way through to some of the emotional impacts. And there's a myriad of things that girls talk about when they've been on hormones for some time. And I just wanted to add my voice to that in terms of what my experiences. Before I get into that, I guess I want to say that why am I doing a medical transition? I know lots of girls who don't want to do a medical transition. That's entirely fine. I mean, we all need to find ways to live our lives. In my case, I know that every time something happens to reaffirm who I am, it somehow makes me more complete. I don't have a huge physical dysphoria. I don't hate my old body. I'm not a great fan of it. It has to be said, but you know, I don't have a massive aversion to my old body, but I have a strong desire to be, for myself, as complete a woman as I can possibly be. And so, you know, that plus all of the affirmations that I've had over time told me that actually medical transition for me was important to start and hopefully to finish. So I'm talking to you now in September 25. I've been on Androcur, which is the testosterone blocker, for probably about 15-16 months now, and I've been on estrogen or estradiol for only about 11 months now. The physical impacts, fairly few and far between, to be honest. Obviously I developed a little bit of a top, only to AA size, although I've now gone on, I had top surgery, and I can go into that in the next video. But the thing I've gained a fair bit of weight, I'm afraid, sorry about that. So when people say you might want to think about buying a whole new load of clothes when you start your lives, if you're not yet on hormones, there is something to that, because I've gained quite a bit of pounds, which I'm not very happy about. I need to keep an eye on that, because for surgery reasons my weight needs to be a certain level, otherwise I'm in trouble. But physical stuff aside, and those changes nonetheless, ignoring the weight one, they have reaffirmed who I am. But I was really intrigued by the emotional stuff, and it's I like to think a lot about everything that's going on and why I'm doing things and the impact of things and the rationale, the changes, the consequence, all that kind of stuff. And emotionally, maybe it also relates back to the fact that my dysphoria in the old days was the biochemical type. It was the depersonalization type. It was the one where I was so divorced from emotion, it was ridiculous. I didn't connect with people. I could do a job, I was professionally successful, all that kind of stuff, but nonetheless, connecting with people for me was impossible. I had no confidence, I had no connection, I had nothing literally to offer in terms of other relationships. That was how I was kind of built in the old days. So I had a big emotional deficit, effectively. Didn't make me a bad person, but it made me an awfully difficult person in some ways to get on with. And so what I've been intrigued by is how these things have changed over time. And it's very clear to me there's been 2 stages of my journey, albeit I'm not that far in, on hormones. Androcur, I started on its own in about June 24, and I was on that for 5 months, I think it was, give or take, just androcore, before all the tests came back, before my endocrine was happy, before I then started estradiol. And over that 5-month period, I found things really interesting. I didn't develop a split personality. I didn't develop any kind of scary problems, physically or emotionally. But what I did find was that as my testosterone level came down, and I started from a level that actually was higher than the male typical range, just my luck, thankfully. Well, not thankfully, but anyway. Having started from such a high level of testosterone, as I came down through the testosterone range, what I experienced was an increasing emotion. I became increasingly emotional in life. There's probably a couple of examples I would give in terms of my inability, or my increasing inability, to control emotions, even if I didn't necessarily know what was triggering them. One was, one day I was going up the road to see a neighbour. The church door was open, there was a choir practicing. I went inside and I sat in the last pew, and I'm not a religious person, and I just burst out crying. I can feel myself getting emotional now. The beauty of the sound they were making, obviously in the context of it being a small church, it just made me cry, and that's not something I ever experienced in my life before. The other example I would give is that one day, it wasn't one day, it was a series of about 3 or 4 days. For no particular reason, I was just emotional. I was just bursting out into tears without any provocation, just sat in my own home for no reason. I'd be sitting at home and for some reason tears would gently start welling out, all this kind of stuff. So during that first 4 or 5 month period, my emotional state changed significantly. I became more emotional. I became much more aware of emotions. And it didn't necessarily take anything specific to trigger them, or at least nothing specific that I could think of. And then later on, 4 or 5 months later, I started estradiol, or estrogen, or whatever it's called. And I take androcore in the form of pills and estradiol in the form of a gel. And to be honest, physical issues aside, nothing much has changed, except that in a way I've stabilized. It might be that I've just come to live and adapt and be happy with who I am, not that I was unhappy before, but since then I'm still an emotional person. I'm a much more emotional person than I used to be. But these days now, it tends to be something specific that triggers it. It could be a news story on TV. It could be an argument with somebody I care for dearly. It could be anything very specific. But that's about it. I'm very, very happy that I'm now this emotional person. I do recall my prior life, and there were times when I would be emotional, but I couldn't get it out. I couldn't reach it. I couldn't connect with who I was or how I was feeling or anything of that nature. Now I'm incredibly emotional, and it can be exhausting at times being so emotional, but I would never switch it off, because I remember the days when, I'll get emotional again, when I was effectively emotionally dead, and I'd rather be alive than dead. And that's my experience on hormones. Nothing particularly major. Physical changes are what you would expect them to be, including the weight gain. Emotionally, I have become more emotional, but I'm not an emotional wreck. I'm someone who's just very aware of being emotional, and it takes a specific thing to trigger them. It can be quite tiring, but I am alive, and being alive has a lot to be said for it. So that's my take on my experience of hormones. As I say, in the form of estrogen, I'm only about 11 months in now, so who knows what might happen in the future. It's relatively early. But for what it's worth, I thought I'd just summarize all of that now and share that with you. And maybe you can put that against all of the other things you may be hearing on YouTube or everywhere else, so that you can understand what might happen if and when you choose to go forward with your medical transition, starting with hormones. Okay, so hope that's okay. Have a good day. Take care. Peace and love all. Cheers now. Bye.